Hello, friends. When I was a boy, I couldn't wait for each month the magazine that my parents so kindly subscribed for me, Golf Monthly. And I was, of course, besotted by the game and read it cover to cover multiple times. Golf Monthly goes back probably over a century. I'm thinking the 1910s. And the first editor-in-chief was Harold Hilton, interestingly. So recently, and as a consequence of my enthusiasm for Golf Monthly, I have confidence in the statistics that they compile periodically, which, if you're like me, you actually find interesting. So here's a picture that was recently, a diagram, as it were, a graph, in fact, that was recently in their magazine, which shows how many putts are made by what length and by what handicap category. And so as you look at it here, you'll see that the best golfers are the red and the yellow. These are the 0 and 5 handicappers, and they obviously make more putts. Interestingly, they don't make more putts than everybody else when it gets to the 15 to 20 to 30 to 40 plus feet. But their improvement, their benefit and their extra skill is evident in the 2-footers, the 3 to 5 footers, and the 6 to 9 footers, and the 10 to 14 footers. Now, I generally recommend, because the short game is so important, you can see how much dramatically better they are, that we practice it. But of course, we have limited amounts of time. And here's how I recommend to my clients how they should practice their short game. So I'm going to show you, first of all, this movie of how to putt. Now, forgive me, this is an old video, very grainy, obviously not very well made. But what it shows is me holding straight uphill 10-foot putts. Let's see it. What I'm demonstrating is how to practice at putting. Obviously an important part of the game, and one of the rare places in the game where you can actually expect to improve your score by half a dozen strokes if you're more successful. It's obviously closely interwoven with chipping. If you chip well, you're nearer the hole, you have fewer 3 putts, more 1 putt. But putting is a special art, and the principal way to develop it is to believe that you're in charge. If you miss, it's your fault. So I just hit 3 10-foot putts, uphill, straight uphill. Look for a 10-foot putt that's straight uphill, and if you miss, it's on us. We haven't figured out how to get you to stand and swing correctly. If you even miss the middle of the hole, there's a good chance that it was an error in the way that you stood or swung or hit the ball. We need to hit from the middle of the club face to the middle of the hole, and if you don't, look for evidence of how you performed your stroke differently from the ones that work, and try to eliminate those features. So 10 foot straight uphill is the way you practice, and your goal is to get around 10 out of 12 in the hole. As you could see by my first 3 there, it's not as unreasonable as it sounds at first blush. So the middle of the club is a lovely old wooden shafted blade putter, the typical kind of putter that was used 100 years ago. And the way you find the middle of the club is to suspend it lightly at the high end, and then just tap the face with your knuckle, and you can actually see where the club to be struck, where it doesn't spin, is the center. And it's rarely the visual middle of the club, as you can see from, if I can show it to you, right about there. My knuckle is substantially nearer the heel. Now, a lot of the modern clubs go out of their way to distribute the weight in such a way that the middle is bigger and nearer the visual middle. But interesting that probably the best golfer, best putter in history, who was a South African, Bobby Locke, used a putter very much like this and actually offered the club to the ball with the ball on the outer half of the club face, what they call the toe. So it's not essential, but that's the starting point. Now, the next portion of the short game that we have to work on is chipping. And they're obviously closely woven together, because if you chip closer, you have shorter putts, you're have a better chance of making the putt. So here is a video of how to
extremely beneficial way to practice your chipping is to use two clubs. Not that we're implying that you limit yourself to the use of two clubs when you're playing, but these are emblematic of the entirety of the lower end of the set. I have an 8-iron and a sand wedge. They're sufficiently different from each other in the way they operate that you get a nice broad understanding of the options and the possibilities when you practice this way. The 8-iron, of course, hits a lower, more running shot with less backspin. The sand wedge stops the ball quickly and is better equipped to get out of bad lies. At your practice facility, take 6 balls of one color and 6 of another. I have 6 white and 6 yellow here. Hit one set of balls with one of the clubs and the other set of balls with the other, and you can get this very efficient color-coded snapshot at the end of 12 balls of which club was the more efficient under those conditions. You only have to do this for a fairly short amount of time, a couple of visits to the practice range, before you get a pretty good and broad understanding of what your options and benefits are around the green.
So what you're seeing is that you chip with 2 different clubs, quite diverse. 8-iron, which by the way is the modern equivalent of, because of the changes in the lofts and lengths, of the 7-iron that was commonly recommended by many golf books through the 20th century as the better choice for chipping than a wedge. If you watch champions, obviously they use the wedge almost all the time, but they have great skill. The rest of us are actually better served by the less lofted club. It's more predictable. So the way to practice your chipping is to, if you're lucky enough to have a chipping green where you can spend a little time and not be in anyone's way, is to take 2 golf balls and your putter and chip those 2 balls and then hole out the less good of the 2 chips and then move to the next hole. Why I say that is actually characteristic of something that Harvey Penick said in his book. He thought that you should hole out everything. And the reason was simple. Under pressure, if you don't have the habit, then you're going to fail. And so he thought that even if it was a relatively unimportant game, you should, even with a 2-foot putt, make an effort to hole it. And even on that graph that I showed you, 2-footers can be missed even by the best golfers in the world. So that's how to, with limited time, isn't that true of all of us? That's how to work on your short game. Now, the putting part of that, I would suggest, being a perishable skill, should be something that you work into your routine and do with some regularity.